Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Life Support. If you enjoy the content, we would ask that you like it, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. Hey, so glad you've joined us on Life Support. We're coming to you from the Waymaker World Conference in Orlando, Florida, sponsored by the American Association of Christian Counselors. We're talking with mental health professionals that are really good at what they do, and they want to point you to Christ, and that's the goal of our program too. In suffering and trauma, many times is where God reaches down and touches us in the deepest places, and we want to know that Jesus is with you. Matthew Stanford is my guest. He's the CEO of the Hope and Healing Center and Institute, PhD from Baylor. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. We were talking last time you visited with us a little bit about the issues of mental health and church and recognizing it and being willing to talk about it. I wonder if we could talk about our children for a moment.
Okay.
Because they are now the new battleground of this whole vaccine war and the mask war. And so I've got 14-year-old twins who are going to high school for the first time. They don't have to wear a mask, but right down the road there's a school district that they have to wear a mask. Some parents are pulling their kids out of school because they have to. Some parents are pulling their kids out of school because they want them to. How are our kids even dealing with all this? I mean, parents can't get along. What's this doing to our kids?
Kids are not dealing with it well. I mean, if you look at the data on kids and mental health issues since the start of the pandemic, I mean, one study came out that said 50% of the parents of teens are reporting that their teen now has a worsened or new mental health condition since the start of the pandemic. And when you expose children, particularly younger children, to these adult issues, kind of these culture war, mask arguments and stuff like that, they simply don't have the cognitive and verbal abilities to deal with that. So, if they see you having a lot of fear, they're modeling you. They're modeling to try to learn to be resilient and deal with stress. And so if you're, absolutely freaking out because your school district is mandated that your child wear a mask, they don't see that as a constitutional issue. They see they're not able to process it at that level, and so you're damaging your child. Okay, and so we can get into. I mean, my PhD is in neuroscience. I've worked in hospitals my entire life. We can get into an argument real easy if you want to about the usefulness of masks. And you just tell me that. You tell me they don't work, and I'll just tell you that's fine. Next time you have surgery, just tell your surgeon not to wear a mask. The surgeon doesn't wear a mask to keep himself protected. He wears a mask to protect you. And that's why masks have been mandated in places. We're protecting those around us in case we have the virus and we're coughing or sneezing. It's not an issue of trying to keep the virus from getting into your body. It's trying to keep it from getting out of your body onto others. And isn't that what the church wants to do? We want to help others. We want to protect others. I look a lot to Martin Luther wrote an extremely long letter, unfortunately 14 pages long, during the Black Plague.
Wait a minute. Now, you went to Baylor.
I know.
Are you allowed to read Martin Luther?
I actually was raised a Lutheran.
Kind of in the back closet?
I was raised a Missouri Synod Lutheran,
Gotcha.
and as my mother said, the only real Lutheran. And so, but Martin Luther wrote this great letter. He was asked by a colleague, was it okay for Christians to flee the plague, to run, to get away from the plague? Or did that show a lack of trust in God, or was that a going beyond our calling? And Luther basically gave a very detailed explanation, but he basically said, as believers, we're going to do what we're asked of us by they used to fumigate and wear masks. And we're going to do what we're asked to do because we've been told by God to obey the governmental authorities. But we're also going to care for those around us. If we are in positions like pastor or governor or mayor, if we've been placed in positions where we're supposed to care for people, we're not going to flee because we're going to meet our calling. If we're just a citizen who just is supposed to care for themselves or their family, well, then it's okay to leave. And I think the same thing here. I mean, what are we doing? And again, we don't need to get into a discussion of whether masks work or not, or whether vaccines work or not. But what are we saying to the population about the way we're acting? We're acting more like politicians than Christians. Christians care about people. Jesus cared about broken people. We're acting more like we're worried about ourselves. And so back to children, what we're seeing are dramatic increases in depression, anxiety, particularly in young females, but really numbers we've never seen before, increases in suicide in these young individuals because of the isolation, the fear, but also because of this overarching kind of discussion, argument, debate that's going on. They simply don't know how to process it, and we're crushing them. And so step back for a moment and don't worry so much about your constitutional rights, and worry about your child, and worry about your neighbor. Because I think that's what Jesus would say. We need to worry about our neighbor.
I think he said something about that.
Yeah, he said something. It was in a book I read one time.
I think it was in the royal law or something.
But the thing is that we're not doing that, and our children are suffering, and the isolation is really damaging them. And we're more worried about whether they have to wear a mask or not, and less worried about the fact that they're just being crushed by this.
Yeah, those are really good words. And I watch my 14-year-old boys, and they're trying to grapple with all of this, and I saw them go backwards last year in their social skills. And
absolutely,
and again, that's not a blaming statement. It's just the reality of what happened.
Right. I mean, I have a 15-year-old son. He's a sophomore now, and so last year, it was his freshman year, and he had to do most of it from home. Yeah. He was begging me to send him back to school. He's like, and he, let me just say, he doesn't particularly, he goes to school to play football. Okay, that's what he does. And so, but he's like, I hate this. I hate being at home. I hate not seeing my friends. I hate not seeing my teachers. I mean, and this is, he's a good student, but he's not drawn to school. He just doesn't love school. But it sounded like it was a kid who just loved school, because he recognized the lack of social interaction was not good for him. And he also realized, as many have, you're simply not getting as good of an education. So we have a group of children who are, I just saw some data the other day, I mean, they're as much as a year to year and a half behind academically. And that's going to haunt us for years to come. And again, these arguments over mask mandates and things like that are not helping our children. Now, I know someone would disagree with me on that.
That's okay.
But the reality is I'm telling you, as a mental health care provider, the mental health of your child is more important than whether they have to wear a mask or not. Let that one go, and let's focus on the other issues.
From an overall perspective, when this whole thing hit, and we've kind of turned everything over to the epidemiologists, and the mental health thing has sort of been in the background, maybe catching up a little bit now. Is that because we don't value mental health, or because we can't see it?
Well, I think generally we just don't have a discussion of mental health. Mental health is just destroying our country as it is. I mean, majority of people with mental health problems never receive any treatment. Half of all the people in prison have a mental health problem. I mean, it affects every aspect of our culture, but we never talk about it. And, with the pandemic, when you turn, I mean, the CDC was supposed to be in charge of this, but they weren't, and so scientists, we're learners, and so we know what we know today, but it might change tomorrow because we learn new stuff. So, people aren't used to that, and so they hear constantly things changing. So they go, well, these guys don't know what they're doing, so we're not going to believe them. And so, I think that, that's been a real problem there in that sense. And so it's, it's a struggle for people to understand, why would one day someone say one thing and another day they say, well, no, we were wrong. Well, scientists do that all the time. That's science. It changes all the time. Science is not, it's learning. And I think people struggle with that because when they think about their government, they want facts and absolute accuracy, and that's difficult. And, there hasn't been a country that's really handled this well, really.
Yeah, it's been all over the place, but nobody's dealt with this before either. So.
No, I mean, the pandemics we had in the past were during periods of time in which, we were, I mean, one of the things is, if you look at the Spanish flu epidemic of the, 1917, 18, there were big protests on not wearing masks then. And so, this isn't a new thing. I mean, people don't like to be told what, that's human nature. That's our sin nature. Nobody likes to be told what to do, no matter what it is. If they told us all to wear a red shirt, we would, no, I like blue shirts, right. And so Jesus wore a blue shirt kind of thing. So, it's just, nobody likes to be told what to do, whether they're in a church or not. And so I can certainly appreciate that. But I think really we have to, as Christians, we do have to step back and we have to say, God has called us to put others before ourselves. And so how can I put my neighbor, their needs before my needs? how can I protect my family, but how can I, take care of my neighbor as well? And the more obstacles we throw up with these ideological issues or, this culture war stuff, the less opportunity we have to share with those who don't know Jesus about Jesus.
Amen to that.
And then really, ultimately, when it's all said and done, that's it.
People are still making decisions about their eternity, whether it's a pandemic or not.
Absolutely. And whether you win the argument about a mask or not, you can win the argument, but the person that you might have just won the argument with may still spend an eternity apart from God because now you had never had an opportunity to share with them. So, I'm not saying they're not important issues. I'm just saying they're not the most important issue.
I agree with you. Matthew Stanford is our guest. We're down here in Orlando with Christian counselors. He's the CEO of the Hope and Healing Center and Institute. So if you were sitting at my kitchen table with my wife and I, and by the way, you're always welcome.
I appreciate that.
We don't probably cook as well as they do in Texas, but, we can put on, I can grill a burger for you. What would you say to us to help protect our children? You talked about the fact that a lot of this is crushing our children.
Right.
So what are some proactive things that we can do to help our kids thrive in the midst of this chaos that we're in right now?
Absolutely. I think number one, I think you have to limit the amount of news and media that you're getting because, frankly, most of it's garbage. We don't get much news anymore. We get commentary.
Yeah.
And so it's overwhelming. And so, me personally, I have a process where I look at the several websites in the morning to get some news, and I watch one news program in the evening, and that's it. I minimize the amount of news. I want to be informed, but I also want to make sure I'm not overwhelmed with the talking points. I think number two, you don't expose children to adult problems. I mean, they're obviously exposed to the pandemic, but they don't need to be exposed to your concerns, your anger about this or that. A mask mandate issue is not a child's issue. That's an adult issue. And so if you don't believe that your child should be wearing a mask to school, but your ISD has mandated that, having a fit at home about that and how their constitutional rights are being violated and then sending them off to school, that damaged them, okay? I mean, you need to, if you want to work to get those masks taken care of, you do that in the background, not with your child. I think another thing is I think you need to sit down and have a conversation with your child. How is this affecting you, the pandemic? How is it affecting them? How do they feel about it? Are they afraid? Have conversations, have daily conversations about this, so that they can have an opportunity to get those emotions out and kind of learn how to express themselves. And I think finally you have to not stop living. I think that's what a lot of people have done, and that is that look at it as an opportunity to spend more time at home with your child. Work in game night. Have devotionals. I mean, watch a movie. I mean, we have all this media at home. Take advantage of that. I mean, spend time with your children, spend time with your family. Don't stop living just because a pandemic is going on. And I think that's what a lot of people, you should have days where you don't talk about the pandemic. And if you're not doing that, then I think you're damaging yourself as well.
Much better to talk about football.
Absolutely. I mean, if there isn't any active football, watch some old football. But I mean, the thing is I've seen so many people just stop living. And I do know that because of the mitigating factors, some people have lost their jobs and there's a lot of economic issues and things like that. But even then, I mean, let's say there was no pandemic and you lost your job. Well, that is a stressor in a family. You're not going to stop living. You're still going to want your children to be educated. You still want your children to be connected to the Lord. You still want to grow in your relationship with your child. Don't let this thing take absolute control of your life, because we will come out of this at some point, and you want to be healthy on the backside of it. You don't want to have such a bomb go off that basically you can never recover as a result.
And we want culture to see Christians as sane, loving people.
Absolutely. I mean, the Luther and the Protestants of that time, they went through the Black Plague. They dealt with it. That was bad. It was very bad. A third of the population of the earth died. I mean, and they were heroes of that. They took care of people and cared for people. And so, there's a real opportunity here. But again, if you step back for a moment take a breath and focus on your child and your family, and don't be so concerned about what someone's telling you to do or not to do. I think most parents will figure it out and know that this is an opportunity for me to help my child become more resilient and learn to deal with this type of thing, as opposed to kind of crush them with the concerns I have.
How would you counsel a pastor to stay mentally healthy?
Yeah, pastors are
during this time.
They're in a tough way. I mean, I know my own pastor's in a tough way because I just can tell from the letters he sends out to the church. I mean, he sent a letter out about, I know, it said something like, I know a lot of you have strong feelings about masks, but blah, blah, blah. So
yeah.
It has these qualifiers on it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say this, again, a pastor has to take care of themselves and their family first before they can make sure that they're healthy enough to minister to others. If they're not healthy, they can't minister effectively. So step back and take care of yourself and your family. How are you feeling about this? If you do need someone to talk to, talk to your friend, talk to an elder, talk to a counselor. How is your family doing? Get your family in a healthy, and then I think you have to say again, there's always going to be something. Either it's a pandemic or it's a hurricane. I mean, I was a day late here because I was in Houston and we had a hurricane on Monday. So there's always something that's going to happen. It's a fallen world. There's never a really good day. And so something's going to come along. So how can I best minister the message of Christ to people in the situation we're in right now? If we're having conversations about, if we're having day-long arguments about whether we should have mask or no mask in the church, how many people came to know the Lord that day because of that?
Or whether we're dispensationalists or...
Exactly. I mean we've been unfortunately doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
Because, should we have the Bible study by this lady or not have a Bible? That.
Yeah.
So the thing is step back and focus on what the most important things are. The most important thing is bringing people to a saving faith in Jesus Christ. It is, so I think, I've heard pastors say before, well, any program we have, we have to make sure that, that is the core of that program. Okay, well, I think it has to be the same thing in the context of keeping your people safe. And you do want to keep your people safe, but, we don't need to try to make some cultural statement about whether masks are a good thing or whether our constitutional rights and the only rights we have are the ones that God gave us. I hate to tell people, but the Constitution it's not in my Bible, okay? And so...
No, I think we kind of sign a lot of rights away when we become Jesus followers.
Absolutely. I mean, and the thing is that, he's in control, and he's certainly sovereign over a pandemic, and we have to remember that. But, we have to be smart. Well, let's not be dumb, okay?
I did see the Constitution in the Patriots Bible, but I'm not sure that was there in the earliest manuscripts.
The earliest manuscripts, yeah. I just think that, how about... if you want to wear a mask at church, you're welcome. And if you don't want to wear a mask at church, we have a social distancing section for you. But you're welcome. Everyone's welcome because we want you to hear the message of Christ. And we want you to feel comfortable coming in. I mean, we already do that to some extent. Churches have a blended service. Churches have a traditional service. Churches have this, have that. We already try to make people comfortable, draw them in. Why is this any different? It's really disturbing to me to see how easily the church is drawn away from, its central message, just for nothing. Yeah. Really.
Yeah, we made a decision early on. We're just going to follow the governor, and we're going to, then we can blame him.
Well, the thing is,
it makes sense because then people can track with that. The governor said it. Okay, that's what we're going to do, right?
And well, I think, there's that book we were talking about. It says for us to follow governmental authorities. Yeah. I think Peter says in 1 Peter, honor the emperor, who ultimately would be the person who put him to death, and he said that. So, I think the fact is that, we are supposed to stand out from the world, and, we should be the ones that say, okay, well, the governor said to do this. We may not agree with it, but we're going to do it because we've been called to be obedient to our governmental authorities, because we know that whether we like them or not, God put them in place.
That's right. All right, we got to get back to the Hope and Healing Center and Institute. We've talked about mental health a lot. We've talked about some other things. What do you do there?
The Hope and Healing Center, we have a comprehensive mental health clinic for people with serious mental illness. We provide a faith-based intervention. They go into about a year-long outpatient program. We pay for everything, including their medication. It's all free. So we raise a lot of money for that. Most of the people that come there can't afford care. But one of the primary things to do is we go into faith communities and we train them to be more involved in access points for mental health care, because we know people are more likely to go to churches first. So we train clergy and staff how to recognize mental health care problems, how to make referrals, how to set up supportive services within those communities like mental health coaches and support groups. We do that same training now in schools, training teachers and administrators how to recognize mental health care problems and help those children get to care. And we're also starting to work with large businesses. So for the Hope and Healing Center, it's all about getting people to care or increasing access to care, because unfortunately a majority of people in the U.S. with mental health problems never receive any treatment.
Yeah, it's too bad. So how can I get in touch?
To learn more about the Hope and Healing Center, just go to hopeandhealingcenter.org. If you're interested in our church training or school training, you can go to our training website, which is mentalhealthgateway.org.
Okay. Matthew Stanford, it's really nice to meet you. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, if you remember, and I know you know Scripture, so you remember when Jesus spent some time with a Pharisee named Nicodemus. This is a guy who took a risk, and he met with Jesus, and they had this long discussion about the Holy Spirit and about being born again. And this Pharisee was trying to understand, and what did Jesus do? He listened, and he spoke with him, and he dialogued with him, and finally Nicodemus, it appears, came to faith at some point. But Jesus went in there with his ears open, listened to what this man had to say, and showed that he genuinely cared about him. And that's what we're saying too. And here's the thing: as we care for others, Jesus will always care for you. He'll always give you the sustenance to do that. He'll always give you the wherewithal. I know you're exhausted. We're all exhausted. Don't feel bad about being exhausted. But God will help you, and I know He will, because He's done that for me. Hey, I want to thank our sponsors here. We've got some great helpers for our program. The Faith Radio Network at myfaithradio.com. You can check out the video portion of this podcast at fivestonemedia.com. And check us out at Ridgewood Church as well at myrwc.org. And we'll catch you next time right here on Life Support.